Okay, let us kick off. If I can just do that and that, I just need to make sure I can actually see myself. There I am there. And hopefully our technology is going to work tonight and be okay. And I'm just going to do that as well so that you can see me and Julie. And Julie is here too. So welcome along. Apologies if you did try and join us last night, or if you're watching this on the recording. Apologies if you were all. I think we had 25 people or something all ready to join us last night before our technology decided to fail us entirely and completely. So apologies for that. Again, it was just one of those things that we worked out what the problem was after. It was not something that was ever going to be worked out on the night, and it was just some complex YouTube stuff. But anyway, we are here tonight, and thank you for making the time. I'm sure we might have some latecomers, so if we do, we'll just let them in as they come along. As I said in the chat, we are both recording this session just now, and we also have Zoom's really cool wee AI companion on, which does a lovely little summary of the meeting afterwards, which we will also make available to everybody. So you'll get like a nice wee summary of it as well on there. Just a little bit of background before Julie says hello and introduces herself. And as thought, you see some people just joining us just now. So anytime you hear the wee beep beep and you see me getting distracted for a second, then that's all it is. I know that many people have seen either Julie or I talk before about this type of stuff, and maybe seen some of the West OS stuff that we've done, or the eSchool stuff, or many of the other places we've been. Maybe we've even been in your school. We don't actually know what school you're from. But one of the things that obviously has been really obvious over the last wee while, and this is something we're going to cover as we go through this evening, is that the mental health issues, especially post-COVID, we don't want to keep on harking back to COVID, but I think you would all agree that there has definitely been a shift in the time since COVID has happened in terms of the mental health of our young people. It wasn't necessarily particularly fantastic beforehand, but now it definitely seems to have got worse. And what we want to do tonight is not only go over some of what we're seeing, because for those of you that don't know, not only do we do schoolwork, but we have a private therapy practice in the centre of Glasgow. So we do, we see young people and adults in there very, very frequently. So we're at the front edge, just like you are, of listening to young people and parents and adults and quite often teachers speaking about their mental health and what's going on for them. And what we want to do tonight is just give you a little bit of an overview as to what we're seeing from our end. And Julie, as she'll explain in a minute, with her experience of not only being in primary schools, but also in the past being a head teacher, and therefore all the stages that lead up to that. But then what we want to do is show you what you can do about it. And we're going to give you two amazing tools tonight. One of them is just a tweak on something you're probably already doing, and I'm hoping that the other one is something that maybe is a wee bit new to you, and you're like, oh, I've never heard that before or seen that before. And then at the end, we'll talk about, again, a little bit more of how to find out more about these things that we're going to talk about and how to take them a little bit deeper. We're going to be here for about an hour somewhere. Our aim is to keep you for about an hour, so that'll be about 5:30, maybe just a couple of minutes after that. If you can stick with us for the whole thing, that's amazing. If you have any questions as the evening goes on, then please say hello in the chat. You'll see the chat function, whether you're on an iPad, a phone, a laptop, the chat function is available to you. If you're not massively used to Zoom, because I know that a lot of schools are more either Teams or Google Classroom, then you'll see that when you click on it, it'll say meeting group chat. That means any question that you post in there will come up publicly and everybody will be able to see it. But if you click on that little drop down menu and choose my name or Julie's name, that will DM us, and therefore nobody else will see it apart from us. And therefore we can just say, look, somebody has asked, and we can anonymize it a little bit for you. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed tonight. I'm just going to hand over to Julie just to do a little introduction, and then she can say hello as well.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Again, just to echo what Brian said, thank you for joining us on night two. And thank you to anyone who's joined us for the recording. There are a few blasts from my past on the list, so they will know who I am. They will know what I've done. They will know where I've been. However, for anyone who doesn't know, I keep counting this up, but I think it's correct. I have now been with HeadStrong for 3 years, which is slightly scary. 3 years in October, so October 2021. I left my post, as Brian has said, as a primary head teacher. So, as well as giving you some actual strategies that you can use tonight, our hope is that we are also going to give you a wee bit of reassurance that you're not alone in what you're facing in schools. And I have been in every one of your seats. So from being a probationer or NQT as they're known now, all the way through to being a head teacher, then I have sat in your seats. I have been there. And I am still in schools, even in this role. At this point in time, I'm in 3 different schools every single week, 3 different authorities. And the one bit of reassurance, whether it's reassuring or not, is you are all facing a very, very challenging time in schools because of the support. So hopefully, as well as learning something tonight, you feel a wee bit reassured that you're not alone and that you're all in the same boat and can support each other in that. So yeah, that's my background. I think I first met Brian in 20, well, I can't even remember the year group, but as a deputy, Brian came in to do some transition work with our primary sevens and then did a wee bit of CPD with the staff. And I just became fascinated by the modality that HeadStrong that uses, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and just wanted to find out more. And as such, I did my first level of training with Brian in 2019 when I was a head teacher. The school that I was a head teacher of didn't have a huge PEF budget, so I had to be very creative and found lots of ways to be creative. But part of that creativity was working with and alongside Brian, and he made some fantastic changes and with some of my young people, which made me want to do more. So I did my first level of training, and what the training did for me was it clarified. It wasn't a light bulb moment, but it just clarified that I never came into teaching to raise attainment. That was never my passion. My passion was to come in and make a difference to the wee people in front of me. And lots of that first level of training just put names to techniques that I already used and I already did with children, and then it built on that. So I'm sure the fact that you're here wanting to invest in your children's mental health, wanting to know more about it, says the same about you. Obviously, we hope that a byproduct of that is that attainment is raised, but that's alongside that passion for making a difference. So when the opportunity came up with HeadStrong to change and move and do what I did, for any of you who were in schools during COVID, I certainly missed that module at Jordan Hill of how to run a school during a global pandemic. So it was a good time for me to come out and do something different. And now I only have to focus on that one area of the curriculum, the health and wellbeing, rather than spin lots of plates and juggling lots of different curriculum areas. So yeah, that's a wee bit of the journey as to why I'm here, and I still get to do all the best bits of the job and still be in schools and support those young people. So that's a wee bit of where I've come from and how I've ended up sitting here speaking to you tonight.
Fab. What we're going to do tonight, we're just going to do a bit of a double hander. So Julie will cover some stuff, then she'll hand back over to me. Hopefully, what we're going to do over the next wee while is give you some stuff, again, like Julie says, there's some reassurance and maybe some clarity as to what you're experiencing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand back over to Julie. She's going to just take you through some data. I'm in control of the slides. So as we put stuff up on the screen, if you see Julie kind of waiting for me to push the button, that's all it is. We can't both be in charge of the same presentation. So I'll stick it up for you just now, Julie, and let's go like that. Fantastic.
Perfect. Okay.
Over to you.
Okay, so this data was published, as you'll see on the screen, by the Children and Young People's Commissioner in 2021, that 10% of 5 to 16-year-olds have a diagnosable mental health issue and that disrupts and affect the classroom. However, this study was actually from 2004, so I think that data back in 2021 or 2004 was scary enough. Weirdly, this week, whether it's the iPhone listening to you as it does, a news article from STV popped up on my Facebook page Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday of this week, and actually it was up-to-date data from December 2024, We're now at the point where we have 284,000, almost 285,000 children in Scotland with a diagnosed mental health issue or a recognised. That's 2 in 5 pupils, and this will not be coming as a surprise to any of you. This will not be a shock to you. If you're in a class of 30, which if you are an upper school teacher, you're highly likely to be sitting with potentially 30 children, more than that. You're talking about 12 children with a recognised, diagnosed additional support needs. That's, we all know the waiting times for CAMHS and how long it takes to get those diagnoses. So that's a scary number. And it was really interesting. I did what I always do in these things, and I went in to look at the comments. And many of those comments came from people who are clearly not in schools regularly. Lots of older sort of people saying, well, those things have always been, that always happened in our classroom. We always had children with it, just didn't have a name then, it just didn't have a label then. And what strikes me about these comments is, I think what people that are not in schools day to day don't recognise is the increase in resource and demand, the increase in need, the increase in recognition versus the absolute decrease in resource. The resource versus demand in schools today is just, it's not sustainable. Back in my early days of teaching, when I didn't have that number of diagnosed needs within the class, the resource I had was phenomenal. And this planning for this CPD has really made me think about that. Back in my early days, I had a classroom assistant almost, if not every single day, to support me in the class. I had a room where I could send my mounting, my laminating down to. Quite often on a good day, the person that done that came up and helped put it up on the wall. We had learning support groups, we had early intervention groups. So we were team teaching and groups were going away and getting that level of support. We had, to the point of luxury, an auxiliary who stayed in a wee room all day, every day, doing her photocopying. She went into the staff room and she made our cups of tea to order at break and lunchtime. So all of those things seemed like luxury, but what they did was they lifted off all of that stuff so that mainly all I had to focus on were the children in my class. So yes, they've always been there. Yes, the needs have always been there. But the resources that you're working with, I'm pretty sure if you come into school and you are fully staffed to cover the classes in your school for a day, it feels like a miracle. You're doing well. And particularly post-COVID, it's just not, the balance has just shifted so far. And we can see that in the schools. And we can see that in terms of, that's the reason we're having at HeadStrong to evolve constantly and pivot and change and do what we're doing, which is part of the reason that we wanted to speak to you all tonight, to just talk about that evolvement and how that's changing and how we're having to be continually creative to support you as well as you. There is never a school that I go into that says, no, we don't need any support from HeadStrong. The resource and the budget is just not there. And even within our own team, we're a team of 4 or 5 deliverers. We're in 11 schools at the moment, 3 primaries and 7 secondaries, and we are all at capacity. So even our resource can only stretch to a certain extent. So the data was scary back in 2004. It's even scarier today. So what do we do about that?
Smashing. Julie, do you want to cover this one as well, or do you want me to pick up this one?
Yep. So again, we'll be preaching to the converted. What we're seeing all the time in classes now is anxiety and self-esteem issues. They're absolutely the norm. We're now looking at who doesn't have anxiety and self-esteem issues being the minority rather than the majority. And I would include teachers in that as well. I would include your support staff. It's everybody in schools, parents. One of the most powerful parts of what I do now with HeadStrong is I get to do this work with parents as well, and that can be hugely impactful. Post-pandemic, you are seeing a significant rise in social anxiety, regulation. Obviously, there's a huge rise in acknowledging neurodivergence, and that can be really difficult with that lack of resource to regulate emotions. A rise in school avoidance, again, that will be very familiar. It's not just in secondary school, and that's what we've said there as well. High school issues now dropping into primary school. Every single primary school I go into, attendance is an issue. It's post-pandemic, it's almost like school is a choice. Do we feel like it today? Do we not? And therefore, we have a huge rise in avoidance and not coming to school. So what brilliant suggestions did the Children and Young People's Commissioner? Well, counselling provision needs to be extended post-COVID. Access to counselling should be included out of hours and out of school. That was 2021. Now what they're saying in 2023 is provision should be extended to include all primary and special schools, which are wonderful suggestions. But as of today, as you will know, none of these recommendations have been rolled out countrywide. We do have, it's there. I remember hearing as a head teacher about the exchange counselling service and my ears pricking up and thinking, this is exactly what I need in my school. And then they rolled out the costs. And again, with my small PEF, it just became unattainable for me to have that in my school. So it's there, but it's not there, and it's not there widely enough.
And that's one of the things we're finding in the private practice part of what we do. And where I've got to admit now, I'm not really in schools as much as I want to be. Julie and I actually had an experience recently where I got to go out and speak to some primary sevens recently, and Julie had to drag me out of the classroom because I was like, oh my God, I've forgotten how much I love this. This is just so much fun. But from many
watching
years,
this on a recording. She is on the list.
Is she going to be on this recording? Excellent. Where I was like, no, please just let me keep on going. Because this is one of the things that really got me passionate about doing this. When I very first started to learn about mental health and all of these different things, my thing was we need to be doing this in schools. We need to be teaching people. And it doesn't matter how young they are. We need to be putting it in a format, as you guys already know, because you guys are already doing this, into a format that allows young people to understand. And if we could get that from a really early age, the transformation it would make. But we've not done that. And as Julie said, in the private practice, we hear quite often, especially for primary age kids, I'll say, have they access to any counselling? Or if I'm working with a young person and somebody who's of primary age, I'll say, have you ever done anything like this before? And the answer most often is no. Whereas when I ask a high school kid, there might have accessed some sort of school counselling, because I would imagine that your cluster schools more than likely have it. The high school in your cluster more than likely has that counselling provision, because that was something that the government rolled out. I think, quite frankly, it's bloody ridiculous that you don't have it, but it is the state of play at the moment. As Julie has always said since we started working together, prevention is better than cure. But what does this mean? Like, what's actually happening? And Julie's kind of touched on a couple of these things already. We have kids and, as Julie's just said, and parents in crisis. And if we can fund that prevention rather than cure, and obviously tonight we're not going to be able to do that, that we start to be able to make a difference further down the line. There are two high schools at the moment that I know of, where pre-COVID, their focus on well-being was incredible. It was brilliant. They had specialist teachers and staff. I mean, again, not the same resource that Julie's talking about earlier on that we used to have, but they had key members of teams whose focus were entirely on well-being, and actually multiple people. And then post-COVID, because of a change somewhere, considering we came out of COVID going, we're going to focus on well-being, now we understand how important it is, all the focus went on attainment. And you're just starting to see it drop down. And from Julie and I, and I'm sure your particular viewpoint, it just seems so short-sighted. You cannot get attainment without well-being. You're not going to get well-being through attainment. Just because I get 5 hires doesn't mean I'm not anxious anymore, but not being anxious might mean that I might get 5 hires. And for us, that starts as early as possible, and therefore in primary school. Obviously, you guys as the teachers, the staff, whatever it is, you might not be a teacher watching this, you might be one of some of a support staff or whatever it is that you are in the school. Everybody should be given training. Again, I know, does that cost money? Of course it does. However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. The importance, the long-term view, it needs to be there. And obviously, we have an issue with parents being given responsibility, which we'll come on to a little bit later. As I've put here on the slide, where is the root cause of the problem? And I'm going to guarantee it's not necessarily the root cause, the actual real cause of it. The chances of that being in your classroom or in your school are probably pretty low. Another thing that's not massively understood is the ongoing impact of COVID or anything like this. A thing that we talk to many people about is this idea that emotions weight. So when something's chaotic, so such as COVID, one of the things that, and you may experience this personally, one of the things that many people experienced was the fact that while we were all going through COVID, there was like this support network where everybody was holding each other up. And then it's when that support network starts to go back to normal, and some people just come out of COVID. The day came when we didn't have to wear masks anymore, just in case you're interested, 28th of April, 2022. That was the day. It was imprinted on my head from doing many, many workshops. And the minute that happened, some people just went, okay, that's us, we're back to normal, and that's okay. But it's at that point when everybody goes back to normal that the people who aren't going back to normal start to notice that gap start to create, and that therefore allows that space for those emotions to come in. It wasn't that we weren't feeling them before, it was the point when you start to notice that your normal has changed. And I think that, I remember when COVID started, I remember saying to many people, and Julie and I talked about this a way back then as well, even when Julie was still in school, about see your little ones, see like that so P1s in nursery, if we look back, maybe even up to P2, actually they kind of were okay-ish, especially preschool, especially those really early years, because they just do what mum and dad asks. The upper school, so your high school kids, especially about sort of third year, second year and above, they didn't like it, but they could rationalise it. It was that P2 through that were really, really going to struggle. P1 maybe a bit, P2 definitely, right through to kind of P4, because they're in that middle ground. And therefore now what we're talking therefore is our kind of P5s just, our P6s definitely, P7s, and then up into high school. But it's still showing an impact, because the impact in the parents is now showing through on the kids as well. Another thing we have to think about, and this again Julie has touched on beautifully, is this idea that you're being left with all of the responsibility with no time, no resource, and no training. And this is the thing I said I'd come back to later on, is this idea of, do you know how many times in a therapy room, and I've got to admit, I nod politely, but I stick up for you guys, I promise, is this idea of, well, the school haven't been great. The school haven't been great. They've actually quite let us down when dealing with a mental health issue of their 10-year-old, 15-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old, whoever it is. And you're kind of like, but what have you done? Like, what have you done as a parent? Why is this the responsibility of the teachers all of a sudden? My mum and dad were both teachers. So I grew up in a teaching family. My grandfather was a teacher. You know what it's like when you grow up in a teaching family. I'm sure some of you have done that too. You just are surrounded by teachers. They tend to be everywhere. And that was my upbringing. And I always remember that my dad used to come home. He was in a band. He was a musician. And he used to have great fun doing that. He pretty much left his work at the door. My wife is a high school teacher. And I know from Julie and colleagues and going into schools and speaking to teachers very often, that is not the case anymore. That idea of walking out at the end of the night just is not there. And a lot of that is shouldering the burden of what's going on in your room. You go home in your classroom, you go home worrying about wee Jack or wee Charlotte and what's going on and why they're anxious, as if it's your responsibility. And it's not your responsibility. It's a big part of your job, yes, now, but again, with no resource and no training, what are we meant to do? And obviously, as I'm sure you've recognised, and I'm hoping it's changing, I actually, in the last week, genuinely have met 2 teachers who have, right enough, been in for therapy, but it's not necessarily about teaching, and both of them are quite young and they're quite hungry, and it's like, right, great, because actually what we've watched since COVID is a lot of experience leaving teaching. Julie is a perfect example of that, and I'm sure you have people in your school at the moment that are talking about it. And then what we have is not enough experts in these key positions. So the schools, the local authorities can't find the experts. And if they can, they then run into funding problems to be able to get them. As Julie said earlier, we never go into a school where we're at AHDS. We might have met you at AHDS earlier on this year, or sorry, late last year. And there's no school comes up to us and says, no, we don't need what you do. Everyone says this is vital until it comes to the funding conversation. And therefore you end up with what we've seen in a few authorities is your ex-teachers who have been seconded to the authority training teachers in mental health with no experience of ever really sitting in a room. And that's great. Look, we need something. So that's better than nothing. And they're absolutely 100% doing their best. But the real key is about getting experts into those key positions. And if we can do that, and when we start doing that, it's going to make an absolutely massive shift, because it's that expert understanding, which is easy to train. And hopefully what we're going to do in just a couple of minutes is actually do that. When we actually get into that place where the experts are training the experts in the classroom, we start to be able to pass on information, and it really starts to make a difference. Julie, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that before we go into our first sort of tip, but I just wanted to...
all I would say is that first 30 minutes probably sounds really bleak as we paint a very realistic picture for you. So hopefully the next 30 minutes is going to be more reassurance. There is stuff that we think can help. We, as I say, have pivoted and changed and evolved to and we'll talk to you more about that a wee bit later, but we're hopeful that there is stuff that we can do to help and support you in that. So let's shift on to the positive part of the 30 minutes now that we've painted the very realistic picture of where you're all probably sitting in your classrooms today.
Perfect. Right, I'm going to kick this off, and I'm going to talk to you about a thing inside that happens inside our mind. So one of the things that we talk about at HeadStrong is about mechanics of mind. So one of the challenges that certain types of mental health work have is that they focus very much on story. So if I've got a young person in front of me, then what happens is that I focus on the way or the experiences that that young person has been having. And that is really, really important. The experiences they've been having, the story that they've had, their upbringing, what happens out of school, all these things are key, because this is how we learn, as you know. But when you start to understand the mechanics of someone's mind, you start to understand how to just take that little step above. And what I'm going to try and do in about 6 minutes is train you in a relatively complex mechanic of the mind, but one that I think you'll absolutely get really, really easily. So let's just get into it, and I'll tell you what this is. This is the concept of parts. So if you understand that the brain does not run on consensus. So what that means is, what I mean by that is that it's not like that you say to your brain, this is what people think that their mental health should be like. I say to my brain, I want to do whatever it is. Let's use a kind of kid example that we've kind of touched on a little bit over the course of this. Let's say that I'm 10 years old, 11 years old, and I say, I want to go to that birthday party that my classmate is having. What we think should happen is that every part of me inside my head goes, yeah, party, and every part of me agrees. However, that's not what happens, because actually the way that our brain really runs is it runs on conflict. So what happens is we get invited to the party. A lot of me might go, yay, party, but a little voice somewhere will go, oh my God, what am I going to wear? Oh my God, who else is going? And depending on that story that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, that will depend on how loud that voice is and exactly what's happening inside my head. And this is the conflict that our brain runs on. If you are someone, which I am going to guarantee that you are, who ever finds yourself fighting with yourself inside your head about something, to use a silly example, for instance, sitting maybe even just now listening to Julie and I speak, going, no, I don't need a chocolate biscuit. I know I want a chocolate biscuit, but I'm not going to have a chocolate biscuit. I've had plenty of chocolate biscuits today. I don't need another coffee, or whatever it might be. These conflicts that we have inside our own minds are totally normal, entirely and completely normal. And it's important that we understand that, because this is such a key understanding for the mind. And we call these parts, I absolutely, can I just say, I'm pretty sure as teachers that many of you are familiar with and potentially probably use Canva. I think as teachers, I think you might even get it reduced or maybe even free or something like that. Canva AI, I am now loving for producing pictures. This picture was me telling Canva about this thing that I'm speaking, and this is the picture it came up with, and it's pretty accurate. So if you imagine this, even by the time you get to P6, P7, so you can imagine these parts building up. So a P1 has some parts, a P7 has thousands of parts. And just to freak you out, every single kid in your classroom, no matter what primary you teach, will have a part of them that is you. especially now that we're in February and we're coming to the end of the year. So they'll have a part that will say, I know that Miss or Mr. whoever you are can cope with X. So they'll know that in this class, they can maybe be a wee bit silly, and then in this class they have to be good as gold and hands on lips and all of that type of stuff. It's like they will have a part of them that's you. But anyway, this is how it's created. They're about coping strategies. So every time something happens, especially something that I don't like, I create a coping strategy inside my head. And that coping strategy we call a part. So when you're dealing with a dysregulated child, whether they be anxious, angry, whatever, you are not dealing with a dysregulated child. If you want, as a new way of thinking about it, you're dealing with a dysregulated part of that child's psyche, which has created a coping strategy, which whatever they're doing in front of you is exactly the best way that that mind has to keep them safe. More than likely, you could probably track that back into their story and what they've experienced and what's happened in the past. And this is why, and we'll show you some examples of this later on, you occasionally, in fact, very often, especially for your most dysregulated children, will turn around and say things after it like, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hit him. I didn't mean to shout. I didn't mean to cry. I didn't mean to do X. Because actually they are confused by this concept of parts as well. On a very, very simplistic level, you can actually think about it through what we call the primary colours of emotions. So like anger, fear, sadness, and guilt. So an anger part, now the job of a part is to keep you safe. So anxiety, in fact, let's just start with anxiety. It's the easiest one. Fear. So the anxiety part, classic anxiety is get out, get out, get out, get out, get out. And if I can't get out, I will shrink. So the wee kid in your class that's having a panic attack, that stops moving, whose physiology locks up, who sits there not doing anything, has a part of them inside their head going, if you move, bad things will happen. Or is going, get out, while having a fight inside their head with another part that goes, you cannot stand up and get out of this class. I mean, imagine it like this horrible conflict inside our head. When our mind's working brilliantly, it works in conflict, but it's very easy for this to get out of balance. An angry part will go, get away from me. So an angry part will shove away, will fight, will punch, will scrape, will do whatever it is to get away. And the minute we start to recognize that these are parts that we're dealing with, we start to get some flexibility in how we deal with them. So here's just a couple of tips. Now, parts is a very, very complex thing. There are whole schools of psychology that are just dedicated to working with parts and all of the different things. I just want to give you some very, very simple tips. Many of these are much more effective after everything has calmed down. And these are not really useful in the moment. The time to talk about mental health isn't while mental health is going. At that point, it's just about keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody okay. So tip number one is to label the part. Now, don't name it. So let's say that I'm Jack. If you call this angry version of me Mark, that dissociation is not useful because I can now pretend it wasn't me. I can now say, oh, that wasn't me, that was Mark. So never ever name the part. But what you can do is you can label it. So if you call that angry Jack, for instance, that's a completely different thing and can be a useful way to discuss it in a way where your kid can basically separate themselves from it. It's like a useful separation. So they're kind of looking at it going, well, why did Angry Jack do that? What do you think that Angry Jack is trying to achieve? And actually some of what Julie's going to talk about can come in very, very useful to this. You can age the part. Now, this is now getting into some quite complex psychology, but often, and more often than not, the part will stay the age it was when it was created. I don't mean to, I'll be careful with this, but if you think about yourself, there are probably responses that you have to certain things, to certain triggers, where even though you're now, I think everybody on the live at least is, I'm going to imagine you're all adults, but everybody, that you have a view of it as if you've turned into a wee you. Like I felt like a little girl, or I felt like a little boy when XYZ happened. It's really weird. Or your response doesn't feel like a like a grown-up adult response, like you'll burst into tears, or you'll get really freaked out, or you'll act in some way because the part of you that's trying to keep you safe is actually 12 or 10 or 8 or sometimes even younger than that. So you could actually ask the pupil, what age do you think that Angry Jack is? Like, when was Angry Jack made? And if he says, well, I've been angry since P3, and that's when I first got angry, you can now say, okay, so he's maybe 7, maybe 8, maybe 6, somewhere about there. And that gives you a chance now, let's imagine Jack's P7, to talk about it, okay, what would grown up you, now the 11-year-old you, what would that 11-year-old say to that 6-year-old to stop them being angry? Now, it's not dismissing the response, it's just a new way of thinking about it, that part is in there. And then finally, is there an opposite, or as I've just said, an older part that can help? So is it like having two, I've just used the name Jack because I'm sure you've got about 1 million Jacks in your classroom. I think it's still the most common name for boys or something. I think it changed a couple of years ago, but I'm imagining in your school you've probably got a lot of Jacks. So like Jack's not normally like that. Like when he gets anxious or when she gets anxious, you know, that's not normal. There's this other side that I see. And what you can do is you can label that, and then you can ask for each to help each other, because angry them isn't trying to hurt anybody. Now, it might do that. I'm not saying that it's not hurting someone if it's maybe bullying behavior or violent or rough or something like that, or angry, but that's not its intention. Its intention is purely selfish, to keep me safe when it fires on. So I can ask, what would calm Jack say to angry Jack? Or obviously insert the name of your choice. This type of work is transformational. And when you start to get into it and the kid really gets it, when kids get it, they love this. It's one of my favourite things to do with primary school kids. And actually, some of the work that I did with some of Julie's young people when she was still a head teacher, when she used to phone me and say, can you come in? I've got this young person. It was this type of work that often made the biggest shift. And we're talking like huge shifts. We're talking about like kids that would be sitting shy in class, being able to stand in front of the whole school and do a presentation after understanding that it was a part of them that was trying to keep them safe, but it wasn't doing its job properly. Now, we're going to share these slides with you. Obviously, we're going to have the transcript and stuff, so you can go back over this again. But I just want to open it as a concept. So even thinking about yourself, think about your parts and how they work inside your head. You're not working with a whole individual. It's not them. If you can dissociate them and let them realize it's a part, it can be really transformational. I'm going to hand over to Julie, and she's going to do her bit. She might have something to say on parts as well.
Yeah, I think this just follows on quite nicely, because what we're going to talk about when we talk about this creative questions part is, again, what's going on inside your head. I'm going to come at this, excuse me, from an adult perspective and take you through this as adults. What you will get after our session is a resource that will help you use this with your young people. So I think it'd be quite useful for you to experience this and go through this process as you, but the resource that you get, as I say, will help you with your children. My experience in terms of this is that my stress, and I did experience stress in my previous role, and as I went through the management ranks, that stress increased. So as a head teacher, as a deputy, there is stress, and I'm pretty sure that you're all experiencing fairly high levels of stress on a day-to-day basis. The stress for me never came from what was actually going on. So a fight in the playground, I went out and I dealt with it. No stress there. It was just, you deal with it, you get on with it. A parent appearing at 5 to 9 wants to speak to me, no problem, let's deal with it, let's go on with it. My stress came from anticipation and prediction. And if I use the words Sunday night dread, you will all know exactly where I'm coming from. That on a Sunday night, or on that last night of the holidays where we never seem to be able to sleep, you are not dealing with a real life issue. You are coming up with scenarios, you are predicting, you are thinking about what's going to happen. So yes, I've dealt with that fight in the playground. Now I have to phone that parent. What is that conversation going to be like? What are they going to say? What if they react this way? What if they don't like the sanction that I'm putting in place? Even though I stand by that, your stress is coming from the what ifs. And those are questions that you're running around all the time in your head. So no one works on the real world when it comes to stress. It's all about prediction and anticipation of what's going to happen. Just like outside, though, all of those things that happen internally will take forms of some sort inside your head. So they will have colours, they will have shapes. It depends on how inside your head works. Mine is very literal, mine is very written. I don't really see images, but I'm still predicting and I'm running conversations in my head all the time. The amount of times I've even run through what might happen tonight as I drive home and what I might say, what we might talk about. That is how I run all the time. And for me, that's where my biggest part of my stress comes from, is in the what ifs. When it comes to get rolling up my sleeves and getting on with things, things are absolutely fine. I am surrounded by notes tonight that I'm not even looking at because I'm here, but I predicted that I may need those notes. So I hope that sort of is you feel that relation to that in terms of your own stress. So here's a wee experiment, and I would like you to try and take yourself through this. If it helps, this can be a closed eye exercise as you go through this. I want you to think of a feeling that you know really well. My trigger when I thought of this was my office phone ringing as a head teacher. As a head teacher, I could hear my main office phone ringing from where I sat. And latterly, no matter what I was doing, I had to stop and listen to hear where that phone call was going to be directed. In the 30 seconds where my clerical staff were either directing, oh, I'll pass you on up to the nursery, I'll just phone Lynn for you, my deputy, or they answered the question and hung up. In that 30 seconds, I seem to have this ability to run through 30 potential reasons that someone was going to get transferred to me and try and anticipate what I'd do about it. And then as the phone got hung up, I could breathe again and go back on with what I do. So my feeling is that phone ringing, that would be the feeling. So I just want you to think of a feeling that you know very, very well. And if you can visualize it, I want you to associate colours with it. What colour would that worry or that prediction or that anticipation be? What kind of size is it? Does it take any kind of shape? Is it a person? Is it a phone? Is it a laptop? What is it, a regular shape? What shape would that be? And I'm guessing this is another one of your Canva AI images, Brian. But
It is absolutely.
is it random shapes like this wee guy is having? What does that familiar feeling that will probably start physically in your tummy, but as you then anticipate and predict, what does that take on? And now what would happen if you changed any of those parts? If you drained all colour from it and just saw that problem in black and white? Does it suddenly feel a wee bit less stressful? If you reduce the size of it? If you change the shape of it? Does that make the problem feel a wee bit smaller?
And this is a really fascinating thing. I'm just going to jump in here. It's a really fascinating thing that you can really play with. Like if there's a technique called spinning feelings where you can actually ask somebody to take the feeling that they have wherever they feel it, move it outside them, notice which way it's spinning in and spin it in the other direction. Now, we're not saying that this is life transforming, but it can stop something. If you were to ask an anxious kid in your classroom, for instance, what shape their anxiety was and what colour it is and what colour calm is, what would happen if you changed the colour of anxiety into the colour of calm? But anyway, I'll hand back over to Julie again. Fascinating stuff.
Okay, so here's some examples of questions that you can ask either yourself or if you're doing this with your children. What colour is that problem? And that leads on from what Brian says. Why those colours? Well, it's all red because I just feel really angry. And as Brian has said, what colour is calm? How could you change that? How could you make it different? How big is that problem? A really nice idea, and this does feature on the resource that you get tomorrow, is if that was a balloon, what would happen if you just imagined that shrinking and you can turn that into the funny of the balloon spinning around the room and just disappearing. And ultimately, what is your mind trying to make happen when you act like this? And it goes back to what we said about those parts. That is the part of you that's trying to make you feel safe. By predicting, it's that taking away that fear of the unknown. If I am prepared, then I can deal with it. However, sometimes we spend an awful lot of time preparing for something that doesn't ever happen. I have colleagues that I work with in my schools that I'm in who are facing challenges every day, but could come in tomorrow, have a perfect day, playtime's really smooth, it's an outdoor playtime, we don't have wet bells, everything goes to plan, we have a great lunchtime, my lesson in the afternoon goes really well, and at 3 o'clock when they shut that door, they go, because they are still exhausted because all day they've been predicting what if he kicks off, what if this happens. So even the most perfect days can leave you feeling exhausted because you're anticipating all the time. So personally, if you have not explored Mo Gaudet, who I think Brian is going to put up now.
Yeah.
Mo Gaudet is fascinating. Is that he has a really tragic story as to why he's looked into things he has. So I would encourage you to go and look at him. But he focuses on happiness, and it's a legacy of his son, the reason that he looks into happiness. But he has a 3-step question to problems that are in our mind. And the first question, and I use this with children now all of the time, is what you're thinking true? Is what you're predicting true? So is a parent on the phone right now? No. So if it's not true, drop it. The way I speak to children about this is quite often children will come to me with real life worries that I can't say won't happen. So if a child comes to me and says, I'm really worried something might happen to my mum one day, I am not in a position to say, oh, don't worry, nothing will ever happen to your mum. But what I can say to them is anything happening to your mum now? Is she safe? Is she well? That's great. Let's put the problem on the bridge and we'll cross that bridge if we ever come to it. And if you ever have to cross that bridge, you're going to have a big support network around you. So it's not a true problem. It's not a real life problem or a right now problem is language that I use quite often with children. That's not to say it won't. We're not here to pretend that bad things don't happen, but it's not a right now problem. So for me, this is now a process that I use all the time as a chronic overthinker. Is it true? Is it happening right now? If it's not, drop it. The way, again, I do that in primary schools is I go into full Elsa mode and we do let it go. And we kind of do the full sort of let's let it go. If it is true, so I have had an email tonight from a parent, I am going to have to deal with it tomorrow. Can I do something about it? And again, what I'll quite often do is I'll type that email out, save it to my drafts. I'm not sending it, but I get it out of my head into something practical, or I take a note, or I make a plan for the next day. I act on it, and then I drop it again until I'm on that bridge, until I can do it. And if there is nothing that I can do about it, there are, in my experience, were parents that I was never going to please, and you will know, or there were pupils that I was never going to make a difference to the way that I wanted to, then I have to accept that problem, and start to do something to make things a wee bit better. Again, another tip to look at is the let them theory. If you've not experienced that, then but I could go off on a tangent about that. But that 3-step, is it true? Is it happening right now? If it's not, let it go. If it is happening, can I do something about it? Do it. And if there's nothing I can do, then accept it, be like Elsa, and let it go.
I love that. I have heard that kind of let them theory. Who was that? That's somebody else famous, is it not? That's come up with the kind
It's
of
Mel Robbins.
Mel Robbins. That's
It's Mel Robbins. It's I'm midway through an audiobook just now, so I'm not going to preach on it because I'm not fully through it. But it changed her life, and it was her daughter that said it. But yeah, that's another. But yeah, if you've got Audible, or if you've got an Amazon, go get it, and let them. There is a flip to it of let me, and that's really important as well. But it's really, really good stuff.
Interesting, fascinating. I will just
chronic overthinker.
I will add in here as well a really interesting thing. I've actually got I am waiting on an Amazon delivery before doing a social media post on this one. An interesting thing you can do with the balloon thing, from how big is the problem. One of the things, especially if a kid is anxious, or anybody's anxious, is one of the issues is breathing, and somebody will stop breathing properly. And breathing is really key. We could probably do a whole hour on breathing. In fact, you maybe even have had people come into school and do kind of breathing workshops and all this type of stuff. Again, does not solve the problem in the long term, but as a way of managing something can. Having some big balloons and asking the kid to blow the balloon up to show you how big their anxiety is. So blow it up until the size of your anxiety. So you might need some quite big balloons, and then don't tie it off, but have them hold it. And as you talk to them and as you breathe, ask them just to keep letting air out. So there's actually this visual of just letting the balloon come down in line with their anxiety. I want you just to show me with the balloon that your anxiety is coming down. I can see your anxiety is coming down. Now let some air out. The whole visual connection to that is a really, really powerful way, as well as them blowing up the balloon helps them with their breathing, because they're actually breathing out properly. So it's a really, really powerful thing as well.
And that concept of breathing the anxiety in, getting it out of you and into the balloon is a nice.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another way, isn't it? You could use that whole thing, Julie, couldn't you? Breathe the colour. If your anxiety is red, imagine you're blowing all that red air into the balloon. And I know from a logical standpoint, this sounds bonkers. It's like, what do you mean breathe the red into the balloon? But the minute you start trying it, this is what your mind loves. The parts of your mind that feel do not deal with language. They don't deal with words, and words are super useful when we come to therapy. But actually, these visualization techniques, really simple, not big things where you have to close your eyes and things, just stuff you can do conversationally, are hugely powerful. Labeling the parts, aging the parts, what colour is it, what size is it, and finding props that can help you. I shouldn't be advertising anybody else's social media, but again, Dr. Julie, if you're not already following her, this is not Dr. Julie. Can I just
Not me
say, Julie has not made it to that level yet. But Dr.
yet.
Julie on Instagram is magic at coming up with these really clever little visual metaphors. Some of which I've got to admit, can I just say, HeadStrong have been using for many, many years. And I don't know her at all, but I'm still blaming her for stealing my patter. I think that's what it is. But anyway, these two techniques, we'd love to know how you got on. And as Julie said earlier, what we're going to do is we're going to send you on a resource after today where you can access it's like a question sheet with even more questions, and these creative questions and how they work and why they work and how to ask them, and we'd love to know how you got on. But when it comes to training, as Julie said earlier, no school has ever said to us that they don't want what we do. So how can we get this knowledge to you? And in doing that, we've been working really, really hard over the last wee while to develop something. And I can see that Mo's asked a question. Mo, we will come to that in just a little minute, just before we finish as well. But we've been developing something that we think is really transformational. And we're just going to take, what have we got? We've got about 10 minutes left. So we're not going to take very long, but we want to just talk to you about this and show you what it is. So I'll just hand over to Julie again, just to kind of kick this off.
So I'm hoping this does kind of answer your question, Mo. Mo's asked a question about what happens if they just won't engage and then they just shut down and you can't get to them. And that's kind of where this has come from. So as I said at the beginning of this, over my last 2 years of being in HeadStrong, we have seen things evolve, we've seen things change, we have seen resource and budget absolutely come down, and we are very aware it's not an if anymore, it's a case of dealing with when PEF disappears. Schools rely and have been able to be creative with PEF for many years now, but that is not going to last forever. We are a business, we are an expensive resource, and we are now becoming more and more aware of how difficult it is for schools to have us in. However, that does not take away from our determination or our passion to make a change. My experience in primary school very much feeds into what you're asking, Mo. When teenagers or secondary pupils are presented to us in secondary or in private therapy, very much that's come as yeah, I need some help. Yeah, mum. Yeah, dad. Yeah, Miss Smith. Yeah, whoever. I want to go and see if I can get some help. And they come through the door at least on the journey to wanting a bit of help. My experience in primary school is a wee bit different. And that quite often I'll get a disgruntled primary seven put in front of me going, nothing wrong with me. There's nothing I need to change. And over my time and combining my experience with it, my HeadStrong experience, this is where this has evolved from. What I found in primary school is the sort of closed eye, the therapeutic side of things isn't as effective with younger children as it is with older children. And what they need is a tangible resource. And that's where change. So change is a tangible resource. I have the journal here. It's an actual booklet that the children work through. And those letters take the children through every step of therapy. So we've got connection, which is a rapport and a relationship. We've got harmony, which is talking about those parts and things that Brian talked about earlier. We have anchoring, which is where all the meaning that children attach to things come from. Navigation, which takes them through where they've been, as well as where they want to go. Where they've been, as Brian talked about, in aging those parts is really important in terms of where they are and what parts they're presenting to you in school. And then at the end, we come out the positive side with growth and gratitude. And then we have empowerment, which is goal setting, taking them through setting goals. And I have been piloting this now. That I spent last summer developing this and have been piloting it in my schools since October. And the impact is massive. So what they have is a guidebook that they fill in that's, as I say, it's tangible. And by the end of it, every single pupil I work with will have a different book because it's on them. So it's a guidebook for how they think, how they feel. And what I've had to learn is giving them the space. And when I've given the children the space to work through this, the results have been outstanding, and it's given the impact that we would get in therapy through this journal. So the navigation takes them to the timeline. There's the anchoring activities. It's everything we would do in therapy. It's just giving them this tangible resource. Okay. You'll just see some wee comments here. And again, this is where I've had to, when I give them this, tell me what I need to know about you. And that's not about, oh, I like football. It's they set 3 wishes of what they would like to be different in their world. And then giving them the space and time. Some of the stuff that children have said in these books to me, I would never have got out of them just in talking therapy. So my world doesn't feel bright at night. That's the words of a primary 5 girl. And that's why I sleep in my mum's bed. So just that, even getting that insight into the colours, the stuff we talked about, my world doesn't feel bright. I get when I say things, my negative thoughts push me down a lot. Those are their words, their thoughts coming out, rather than me sort of paraphrasing how they feel. You will get these slides so you can have a quicker look at it. I will not take you through all of them.
I think it's really powerful, Julie, as well. I mean, as you just said there, I regret it when I say it or after it and feel guilty. It's like this is what we were talking about earlier about them being able to recognize how they're feeling. That bottom right one, I don't believe in myself because of my negative voice. So that negative voice is exactly the parts thing that we were talking about earlier. So already, without even realizing it, for somebody who is trained and knows what to look for, that is a clue as to what's going on. So that negative voice, we can now talk about that negative voice as a part of them, teach them what that means. And this is the type of thing that Julie's been doing in the pilot. We've got a couple of other examples, Julie, as well here of some stuff that you've done.
So again, this is then we'll then look at people they look up to. We go through attributes of their heroes, and then it's a bit like Brian said, that those parts we steal from other people. We'll hear my mum's my hero, so what would my mum do? Remove herself from the situation. You can see that there. She would go out the back for some coffee. So we then use that to bring in real life strategies, what you can do. I've just done that there because I went back to the 5 things I need to do of a wee girl that I'm working with who's coming out the other side and is doing really well. And when I asked her what made the difference, you can see that in my writing, her answer to me was, I've started being my own best friend. And that's the work we've done in terms of that negativity. So this is what we've sort of been trialing. But as I said at the beginning, we are a small team and it's really difficult for us to get to you. So we had to become creative, and we suddenly had a thought of, what if we taught you guys how to deliver this work? And that's where the change program and the change training has come from. So we are offering you the chance to become the first group of change practitioners. Brian, I think this was, will I hand back to you for this bit?
Yeah, I'm happy if you want to cover it, and if you're off and running, please keep going.
Okay. So, sorry, I just was aware that I'm on a roll, that I am really passionate about this. I hope that's why that comes across, that I'm going for it. What we would love to do is, rather than us being a tiny group who can deliver this, is to get this. This is one way of us being able to get this solution into every single school, and that's to train the people who know their children best. That whole first letter of the change program, the connection, you probably already have that rapport, that relationship, and all of this only works on relationship. This is where it becomes most effective, is building that relationship. We are offering some training that will be coming up where we will transform. This is a tiny taste of the kind of thing that we are hoping to do over a few days next month, transforming your understanding of mental health, how your brain works, giving you that wee bit of insight into the modality we use, and giving you tangible skills to take back into your school and helping your children make such a difference, or making such a difference to your children. Like I said, this is coming back full circle. I came into teaching to make a difference, as I'm pretty sure all of you did. And for me, this is a real tangible solution that will help you make that difference.
Absolutely, and we were so excited about it. I've got to admit, I mean, the real bulk of this idea has been Julie's thinking, and I remember when she was starting to take me through it, and it was just like, oh, this is just what an incredible ideas to train you guys in doing it, to run CPDs, to build up a bank of practitioners. The dream is that the way the training is going to work is there'll be 3 days. You'll then be given your first block of manuals where you can go and you can take your pupils through the process. And then there'll be a follow-up day where you'll come back about 6 to 8 weeks after that, and we'll have a big discussion about what's gone well. You'll present back some of your findings to the group, not in any big cringy way where you have to stand up or anything like that. We're going to make it really safe for you to do. And therefore we get feedback. Our dream here is that over the next couple of years and beyond, we can build up this bank of teachers who have been trained in therapy, not to a level where they can become therapists, because that's not your dream. You want to go and help these kids, but to a level enough where the parts, the questions, that these things are just coming naturally. You start to find yourself not doing the change program and still knowing the questions and what to look out for because you've actually been given the time to train in them. So, and here's the practicals, and we hope that these really do fit you. Our first change training is going to be happening the 25th, 26th and 27th of March, so just before Easter. And there's a follow-up day that will happen 6 to 8 weeks after that. We've just not put the date in for that, but it will happen before the end of, probably before the end of May, just maybe coming into June depending, but definitely before summer term finishes. The training will happen in Glasgow city centre. It is an in-person training because, as Julie said earlier with the questions, one of the best ways to learn this stuff is to feel it happening to you. So it's not that we're going to ask you to fill out your wee hands, but we will find a way of doing something very similar. Oh, is Julie's planning on getting you to fill out your wee hands. I think that's the way she's going. But it will be a very similar thing. So you experience what the programme is. It is genuine. I train therapists all the time, and it is just the most inspiring, amazing rooms to be in when everybody's talking and everybody's enjoying it. And not only that, but everybody that's in that room has exactly the same values and beliefs as you do, which is, I am here because I want to make a difference and I want to learn this stuff. This isn't a CPD where everybody's going to be sitting there going, oh my God, how many days of this is left? This is a CPD where everybody's going to walk in the door buzzing and hopefully leave at the end of it even more buzzing than they were when they came in, because hopefully Julie and I can show you things that you didn't even imagine that were even possible. There's only 20 places. In order to get this over, we have to ensure that the group is relatively small so that we can make sure that everybody gets the experience of the training. Now, in this pilot, you never know. We might not even have 20, so you might even get the opportunity to be part of a relatively small group. Because it's the pilot of us actually rolling out, Julie's been trying this in schools now for about the past 6 months or so, I think, maybe even slightly longer than that, and it's kind of very early formats and showing incredible results with, in fact, some of these schools, it actually says already some of those 20 places have gone, because some of the schools that Julie is in piloting this are already saying, I need to get somebody on this. In fact, I think one of the schools is planning on sending 2 people. So we've kept this, because it's a pilot, we have to try this out first as well and make sure that we're giving you the right training. So you guys are going to be essential to the development of this. It's only £1,750 plus VAT. I always like to say to teachers, because this is not your wheelhouse, and I totally get it, it's never had to be, just to remember that schools don't pay VAT. So that all that means is that when you see the invoice, it looks as if, oh my God, it's 20% more expensive than it was, but actually as a school, you are VAT exempt. So that VAT gets claimed back by the council and everything. It's a whole thing. You pay that £1,750, and then there's accountancy things happen. And because we're doing it in March, if it helps your school, we can pay it in 2 installments. So maybe if you've got a little bit of PEF or a little bit of funding left, whatever it is, and you want to do a part of it before April starts and before the end of March, and then a part just after March, then we are more than happy to chat to you about it. And I'm sure I shouldn't be saying this in a recording, but not tell any of your people that are meant to know that and anything like that. So we would love you to be part of this. And you, apart from, we talked about it at AHDS, and it was hugely well received. Julie's been talking about it to a number of schools. There's a number of emails and things are going out at the moment, looking for people to join us on this training. This is the first time we've spoken about it in a presentation where we've actually been able to show you, and genuinely we have skimmed the surface. That whole parts thing that I talked about earlier, I reckon is probably going to be a good couple of hours at least about talking about that and how they work and giving you an experience of working with your own parts. The questioning we can go really, really deep on. And again, Julie's designed this manual to have a lot of the questions in it, but how to help. And it's just going to be amazing. We're both so excited and we would love you to be part of it. So if that is something that you want to do, then it's a very simple thing. All you need to do is just send us an email, and what will happen is that Julie or one of our team, it's Julie, depending on where she is, if she's in a school, will pop it over to Robin, who's one of our office team, or Liz, and they will basically get you in a call. So you don't have to commit just now. If you're just interested in hearing and speaking to Julie, asking questions, how does it work? What will I be able to do at the end of it? Even if it is just, look, I'm convinced, maybe you are the head teacher. I don't know who you are. Maybe you're like, right, I'm sending someone on this. If that's the case, just email Julie. All our details are there as well. Again, remember, these will be shared with you, so you'll be able to see these later if you're like, oh, try to frantically write it down. But you can also contact us through any of our social media channels. And just let us know that you are on this and that you're interested in coming along. And we would love you to be part of that first group of change practitioners. I get very excited about this, but I will just drop in that one of the plans is in about a year's time, maybe slightly longer, depending on how many trainings we've been able to do, is to then develop what we've called the Change Master Practitioners, which will be another level above that, where we'll be able to train you in even deeper skills, where as a teacher, you'll be able to, it's just such a genius idea. You guys already have so much. We just want to add those little bits onto it. Not going to make you into professional therapists who that's all you do every day. What we just want to do is give you the skills that you probably go, I wish I could. I wish I could do that. I wish I knew how to get through to them, just like Mo asked. I wish I could break through that barrier. We are going to show you how to do that, and do it in a way that's so elegant, so smooth, that anybody that you use it with won't even be able to tell. And a wee funny jokey thing in my head has just said, yes, you will be able to use these skills with your partners as well. I will just put that out there, that these skills are not only of use for kids, that they do work with mothers, partners, and various other people as well. So I hope that you can feel our passion for it, and I hope that your passion. Thank you, Lorna, for saying, Lorna's saying this is really exciting. It looks brilliant. It looks great. We'd love to have you there, and hopefully we've made it in such a way that this is a perfect opportunity for you. Julie, anything you want to add before we let these people get on with their
evenings? Just to finish off, you're probably all sitting really excited, and you probably know you have to go to your head teacher, and you will be faced with barriers. I think the way to approach this is, even in my small PEF budget, I would have been able to find that amount of money, because what this is going to give your school is a sustainable resource that will stay with the school and it will build on. The way to look at that, it's a coaching program for primary school pupils underpinned by therapeutic interventions. So, and the other barrier you will face is, how do you get that time out of school? But again, it's getting that point across that this small investment, those 3 days, will come back in leaps and bounds into your school. What you will get from us thereafter is ongoing support. There will be sessions like this even after it. We'll be constantly evolving. It's not a 3 days and off you go and do it. So I personally, again, I'm dead passionate about it, but I think for that amount of money, what your school will get in return is invaluable. So yeah, really excited about it. I cannot wait. This is just giving a wee flavour of what those 3 days will be like. And yeah, I can't wait for it.
Absolutely. We're even trying to find a hotel, can I just say, and this might be the clincher here for anybody that's like, oh, this sounds great. We're even going to provide you lunch. So I mean, when you think about that, free lunch for 3 days. Now, it could be a Marks and Spencer's meal deal. I don't know what exactly this is going to look like, but you're going to be well looked after over those 3 days.
Even getting a lunch break.
Absolutely, you can get a lunch break.
Never mind eating something.
Anytime I find this when we go into schools or do these types of CPDs and we offer lunch, there's all these teachers after 20 minutes, even 10 minutes, looking at each other going, what do I do with the rest of this time? But anyway, we really hope you can make it. Drop either of us a mail. Julie obviously is going to be running with this. Now, I will just say that Julie's going to be going on holiday and is off for the next 2 weeks. Is that right, Julie? the
2
next
weeks, yeah.
fortnight, next 2 weeks. So in the
But I will
short
be checking
term,
my emails.
she will be checking her emails, which she shouldn't be. But anyway, she will be. But in the short term, in the email address that we put up, if you just put Brian at the start of it, then you'll come through to me. But you'll get that in Julie's out of office anyway. My email address will be on it. But she will
Yeah.
be checking and she can forward on to me.
Yeah, and you will also get tomorrow. Robin and our team has got the resource ready to come out to you tomorrow. You will get the resource, but there will also be an Eventbrite link. If anyone is a dead keen being, there's a £50 deposit and that will secure your place immediately. But if you want to chat about it, then that's fine. But there is that option just to get in there straight away. If you go in tomorrow morning and your head teacher says, yeah, go for it, then that option is there as well.
Perfect. And thank you, Mo, again for your feedback. Wow, this looks fantastic. Thank you very much for that. And if you're watching on the recording, then you're running out of time, depending on how long it's taken you to actually switch this on.
We're full.
So please get in touch with us as soon as we can. We'll let you know if there are any spaces and what spaces there are left. But yes, Julie, anything to add just before we wrap it up?
No, just thank you. Thank you for your patience and joining us tonight after last night.
Yeah.
Lessons learned, and we will know where to go next time. But yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for coming back and joining us.
I love a YouTube live. I'm just testing it next time. I'm just going to make sure that we've done a full test and that it's fully working before we actually push the button next time. But thank you very much for being so patient, as Julie says. And yeah, we hope that in about 6 or 7 weeks' time, whenever it is, in that hotel room in Glasgow, that we see you there. And we'd love you to join us for change. Smashing. So thank you very much, everybody. See you all later.
Folks. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.